there, first graders. It's Mrs. Ingalls, and I am here to teach a writing lesson today. Our standard for today is 1.11a. Plan a first draft by generating ideas for writing, such as by drawing and brainstorming. Our target is, I can generate ideas about a topic by brainstorming to tell a personal narrative. So what you're going to do, generate means to come up with. We're going to come up with ideas about a topic that will be a personal narrative, and we're going to do it by brainstorming. I bet you're wondering, what is a personal narrative? Right here, I started an anchor chart that says personal narratives. I'm going to tell you everything that we need to include in order for our writing to be a personal narrative. So the first thing I want you to know is a personal narrative is a story about you. Personal means about you, and a narrative is a story that we tell in a certain order. Let me add that to our chart so that we remember that. So there we go. Personal is a story about you, and a narrative is a story that we retell in a certain order. The next thing that is important for you to know about a personal narrative is that a personal narrative is a story told by you about your own life, something that has happened in your life. Because a personal narrative is a story about your life, you're going to see certain words in your personal narrative all the time. You should have the words I, me, my, mine, because all of those words are words that we use when we're telling about ourselves. Let me add that to our chart. There it is, the words that we'll see, I, me, my, mine. And then just a reminder, it's a story about your life. So you might start with one time I, and you tell a story about something you've done. The next important thing for a personal narrative is that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. I labeled these boxes with a B for beginning, M for middle, and E for end. The last thing I want to add to my chart, my anchor chart for personal narratives, is that personal narratives have lots of details. The details help the reader to feel like they're there or to really picture what happened or what you did when you're telling your story. Those details that we use are sensory details. We tell what things look like, smell like, sound like, feel like, or taste if we were eating a birthday cake maybe. But we also use internal details that tell how we were feeling. Were you happy, excited, or was it a bad day and you were upset? So I've added details, I added sensory, and I put a picture that represents each of our 5 senses, because those are things that we use to describe in our personal narrative. And then I also wrote internal, and those are the feelings that we have inside. Were you sad, angry, happy, or feeling love and joy? And there's many more that you can include, but I just put them there as a reminder. Now we know exactly what goes into a personal narrative. I'm going to read a book to you today, and I'm going to see if I can tell if it's a personal narrative. The title of the book is Enemy Pie, and it's written by Derek Munson and illustrated by Tara Callahan King. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. Let me see. Were there any clues in there that this could be a personal narrative? I remember that a personal narrative uses words like I, me, my, and mine, and it's telling a story about someone's life. Let me look in here. I do remember when the character in the story said, and I was on the best baseball team. That is one of the characteristics of a personal narrative. He's telling about when he was on the baseball team. Let me keep reading and make sure. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood, right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I remember that personal narratives use words like I, me, my, and mine, and they tell a story from someone's own life. And I'm thinking, does this book show any of those characteristics? Well, I noticed he said, I did not like Jeremy Ross. So I do think this is starting to show some characteristics of a personal narrative. The character seems to be telling a story about his own life. Let me keep going just a little bit more so I can be sure. Dad understood enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn out scrap of paper, faded with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said, satisfied. Let me try one more page. You may be wondering what exactly is enemy pie. I was wondering too, but Dad said the recipe was so secret he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing all morning. He gave it right back to me. Okay, friends, I'm going to stop right here. And I'm going to check one last time against my list and make sure I can tell if this is a personal narrative or not. In this book, the little boy is telling the story of his life. He is. He's telling about this new kid moving in, and he's telling about how the new kid wasn't very nice to him. And I think that would be the beginning of the story. The second thing the story needs to have is a middle. And we were just starting to read the middle. It was where Dad was trying to help him make enemy pie to get back at his enemy. So I bet if I kept reading this, there would be an ending too. And we might visit that on another day. But right now, I think I am ready to declare that this text that I was reading, this book, Enemy Pie, is a personal narrative. It's a story about the little boy's life that the little boy is telling us. He's telling us about his life, and he's using words like I, me, my, and he has a beginning and a middle, and I know there's going to be an end on there. The author or the child telling the story used sensory details like explaining that it was an old, worn, faded recipe from the recipe book or paper from the recipe book. And also some internal feelings were also displayed through the text, that he had an enemy and that he didn't like them. Those definitely bring up the feelings of anger, upset, maybe even hurt feelings because his best friend was included and he wasn't. So boys and girls, I think I am ready to say that this text, Enemy Pie, is definitely a personal narrative. And what a great example it is to help us get started on our own personal narrative. So friends, some of you may have already began a heart map, which is where we put down ideas of things that we can write about. I already have things like I could write about at my birthday party or going to a friend's birthday party, a sleepover I've been to or that I've had at my house, a picnic I've been on, family night. I can write about a trip to the zoo or my favorite vacation. But today I'm going to add something else. I want to add some feelings that we can write about. Okay, I want to say, just like the character in the story, I could write about a time I was angry. Something else I could write about is a time I was excited. So I added a time I was excited to my heart map. Another idea of something that I could write about would be a time I was scared. I could write about a time I was scared. Let me add that to my heart map. Another feeling I could have is maybe a time I was brave. I could even put that on there. Let me add that to my chart. Now, I'm not going to fill in my entire heart map today because I want to always be able to add more ideas to it as I think of them. But today, I just brainstormed or wrote down a bunch of ideas about feelings I felt before, and so that I could choose times when I felt a certain way and tell the story of that situation or that experience that I had. I wrote, again, a time I was excited, a time I was angry, a time I was scared, a time I was brave, and you might want to add those to your heart map, or maybe there's other feelings that you want to write about. But we're going to use these ideas that we brainstormed today to start our plan for our writing in our next lesson. So make sure you put as many feelings as you can think of, and make sure you have a story to go with it. When you write a time I was angry, you've got to have a story that really happened in your life when something made you angry. All right, good luck. See you tomorrow.